You grew up loving these heroes: the masked lawman, the fearless stagecoach driver, the gunslinger who never missed. But every one of them was stolen from a real person: black, a woman, or an immigrant. And I'm saving the worst for last. That wasn't forgetfulness. It was a choice. Remember that phrase, because at the end I'll show you who made that choice. These are 20 legends Hollywood erased. Number 1. You grew up hearing about the Lone Ranger, Black Mask, White Horse, the most upstanding hero in the Wild West. But there's one detail in this story no one tells you, and I'm saving it for the end. And no, it's not the one you're thinking of. The man behind the legend was born enslaved in Arkansas. His name was Bass Reeves. He escaped from his owner during the Civil War and came back years later with a badge on his chest, a deputy U.S. Marshal in Indian Territory. More than 3,000 arrests. Stop and think about that number. The Bible always right next to the handcuffs. He never needed a mask to be feared. Hollywood took his life, covered the hero's face, and made him white. They didn't just steal the credit. They stole the name of a man who was born as property and ended up representing the law. Now, for that detail I saved. Among those 3,000 arrests, one of them was his own son. When Benny Reeves broke the law, Bass rode out and brought him in himself, because to Bass Reeves, the law had no exceptions, not even blood. That was the real Lone Ranger. The character became a legend, the man became a footnote, and number 2 was erased in an even worse way. Number 2. You've seen this scene 1,000 times. The stagecoach crossing the mountains with the mail on board, always with a white man holding the reins. But on the most dangerous route in Montana, the person holding them was someone Hollywood would never put on a poster. This driver stood over 6 feet tall, smoked cigars, took on a mail route no man wanted, delivered mail in the middle of blizzards, and when the snow stopped the wagon, went on foot, faced wolves and outlaws alone, in the dark, and never let the mailbag sit still. Her name was Mary Fields, born enslaved, a black woman doing the job Hollywood swore belonged to white men. What they did afterward was simple. They turned her into a folklore joke, a story told in bars, and gave the title of Western tough guy to the men on the posters. The work was hers, the credit went to someone else. But if Mary's story bothers you, the next one hides a secret that was only discovered inside a coffin. Number 3. You've seen the scene in the movies. The tough stagecoach driver, hat pulled down over his eyes, guiding 6 horses down a dirt road. Hollywood called that guy a hero and moved on. But the best stagecoach driver in the West wasn't exactly who everyone thought he was. His name was Charlie Parkhurst. He drove the most dangerous stagecoach routes in California, and no one in the business was better. In 1868, Charlie went to the polls and voted, decades before any woman in the country had that right. Women in the United States didn't gain the right to vote until 1920. 52 years earlier, Charlie had already voted. It was only after Charlie died that they discovered the truth. Charlie had been born Charlotte. A woman spent her entire life doing the toughest job in the West, and no one knew. She voted before the law allowed it, and the history books pretended it never happened. Her name disappeared from the pages. Charlie hid who she was for an entire lifetime and got away with it. The next man on this list couldn't hide who he was, and that's exactly why 80 armed men decided to kill him. Number 4. You've seen this scene in the movies. A Mexican guy with a mustache walks in, pulls a gun, and dies before the 3rd act. No name, no past, no chance. Hollywood called that a bandit. But the real man existed, and his name was Alfigo Baka. A Mexican-American, he was 19 years old when about 80 armed cowboys surrounded the place where he was and decided to finish him off right then and there. 1 against 80. The standoff lasted a day and a half, with no breaks, no backup, and no one coming to save him. When it was over, the 80 men left, and the 19-year-old walked out alive. No studio wanted to tell that part. They took a kid who held off 80 men by himself and turned him into an extra in the background. They stole his name, stole what he did, and handed his courage to a white hero in a spotless hat. A man who held out against 80 guns for a day and a half became a footnote just because his last name was Baka. They stole Alfigo's courage. From the next man, they stole something even stranger, an invention you've watched 1,000 times without ever once hearing his name. Number 5. Every rodeo you've ever seen has steer wrestling. But here's what no announcer will ever tell you. The man who invented it was banned from the sport, banned from his own invention. And the reason why is the ugliest part of this story. Bill Pickett, born in Texas in 1870, the son of formerly enslaved parents. He created bulldogging. He would jump off his horse, grab the steer by the horns, and bite the animal's lip like a bulldog until he brought it down. No one had ever seen anything like it. He became the main attraction at the famous 101 Ranch Wild West show, performing for presidents and even British royalty. Then white rodeo stars copied the move, took out the biting, kept the trick, and took the fame and prize money. Pickett himself was banned from major rodeos because of the color of his skin. Shut out of the sport he invented, he died poor in 1932. The Rodeo Hall of Fame didn't induct him until 1971, 39 years too late. They stole this man's invention. From the next cowboy, they stole his name, literally, and sold it back to America with a white face on it. Number 6. You've seen the Hollywood cowboy 1,000 times. John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, always a white man riding off into the sunset. But hold on, because the real Deadwood Dick was nothing like that. His name was Nat Love, a black man born enslaved in Tennessee. After the war, he headed west with nothing and became one of the best cowboys on the cattle trails. Then came 1876. Nat rode into Deadwood, entered every roping and riding contest in town, and won every single one by one. The crowd was so impressed that they gave him the nickname Deadwood Dick right then and there. And what happened next? Dime novels and Hollywood took that name, put a white face on it, and sold the legend back to America for decades. The real man was pushed out of the history he built with his own hands. Nat Love died forgotten, while a made-up white hero used his name. Nat won his fame out in the open, in front of a cheering crowd. The next soldier on this list could only serve by hiding, and fooled the entire United States Army for years. Number 7. Hollywood made you believe the Buffalo Soldiers were just tough men in blue uniforms. But one of those soldiers was carrying a secret the Army never suspected. And when the truth came out, they ripped the name out of every official record. In 1866, a recruit signed the enlistment papers as William Cathay and joined the infantry. Marched, drilled, fought through illness, wore the uniform for 2 years. Except William Cathay did not exist. Her real name was Cath Williams. Born enslaved in Missouri, she reversed her own name and enlisted disguised as a man. She is the only documented female Buffalo Soldier in U.S. history, at a time when women couldn't even vote in this country. Her reward? The Army erased her service from the official records, and military history pretended she never existed. A woman fooled the entire Army, put on the uniform, and marched as a soldier. But while Hollywood made movie after movie about the cavalry, her name never appeared on screen or in the books. They erased one soldier from the records. In the next story, they erased 15,000 people from a single photograph. Number 8. You know the famous photo of the Golden Spike ceremony in 1869 when the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. Hollywood shows cowboys and tycoons, but look closely. There isn't a single Chinese face in the official picture. Around 15,000 Chinese immigrants did the most dangerous work. They were lowered in baskets down granite cliffs in the Sierra Nevada, lit the dynamite, and hoped they would be pulled back up in time. They were paid less than white workers, worked longer hours, and still had to pay for their own food. Hundreds died in explosions, avalanches, and blizzards, many buried without names beside the tracks. And when the job was finished, they were cut out of the photo, the speeches, and the history books. In 1882 came the final blow. Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, blocking the same people who had connected the country from coast to coast from entering. They built America, and America slammed the door in their faces. 15,000 people cut out of one photograph. The next man actually made it to the screen in one of the most beloved westerns ever made, but with someone else's face. Number 9. Have you ever watched Lonesome Dove? Then you know Dietz, the loyal tracker from the series. What Hollywood doesn't tell you is that he was a real person. His name was Bose Ikard. He was born enslaved in Mississippi around 1843 and was taken to Texas as a child. After the war, he became Charles Goodnight's right-hand man on the Goodnight-loving trail, driving thousands of cattle from Texas to Colorado. Goodnight trusted him so much that Bose carried all the ranch's money, thousands of dollars, because no outlaw would suspect a black cowboy. He faced rivers, stampedes, and attacks on the trail, and he never failed. But in the movies, the face of the man who opened the West was made white. Bose was reduced to a nameless supporting character, while Hollywood actors got the glory. Goodnight had these words carved on his headstone: "Never shirked a duty, never disobeyed an order." History knew. Hollywood hid it. Bose rode down trails other men had blazed. The next man blazed his own. And it still carries his name on the map today, even though you've never once heard it. Number 10. You've seen 1,000 westerns with white explorers blazing trails through the mountains. Kit Carson, Daniel Boone. Hollywood loves those names, but there's one man the movies left out, and he did more than all of them put together. Jim Beckworth was born enslaved in Virginia around 1798. He gained his freedom and became one of the most respected trappers in the Rocky Mountains. In 1850, he discovered a passage through the Sierra Nevada that thousands of settlers used to reach California. The route still bears his name, Beckworth Pass. He dictated his memoirs in 1856, but historians at the time called it all lies just because he was black. For more than a century, school textbooks simply pretended he never existed. No statue, no movie, no credit. A man was born in chains and opened the doors to the West, and America responded by erasing his name. When Jim told his own story, they called it a lie. The next legend had the opposite problem. Her story wasn't erased. It was rewritten as a cheap romance. Number 11. The movies showed you a young woman hanging on an outlaw's arm, a love interest, and nothing more. But the real woman was a whole different story. Her name was Myra Maybelle Shirley, born in Missouri, and she rode in a velvet dress with 2 revolvers at her waist. When half the country was hunting Jesse James, it was on her farm that he and his gang found a place to hide. In 1883, she was convicted of horse theft in the courtroom of the famous hanging judge, Isaac Parker, one of the first women to sit in that defendant's chair. Newspapers at the time gave her the title Queen of the Bandits because she ran her own game in a world of armed men. And what did Hollywood do? It stole everything. They erased her name, her authority, and her fame, and turned the boss into an outlaw's decoration. She didn't follow any outlaw. The outlaws were the ones hiding behind her. And Belle wasn't the only woman the movies cut out of a famous gang. The next one rode with the most wanted crew in the entire Old West, and the law never even suspected she existed. Number 12. Hollywood has shown you Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid 1,000 times, Two men, easy smiles, and not a single woman on screen. But the real gang had a secret. Her name was Laura Bullion, the only woman in the Wild Bunch, the most wanted gang in the Old West. While the men robbed trains, she was the one who passed the counterfeit money along, the most dangerous job, done right under the law's nose. Every fake bill the gang made passed through her hands before it became clean money on the streets. And when the agents got close, she changed her name and disappeared, town after town. The police were looking for a gang of armed men. No one suspected the quiet young woman on the other side of the counter. But when the movies and books told the story of the Wild Bunch, Laura was cut out. The men became movie legends. She became a footnote. A woman rode with America's most famous outlaws, and history erased her name. At least the Wild Bunch kept their legend. The next robbery closed out an entire era of the Old West, and the person who pulled it off got turned into a punchline. Number 13. Hollywood loves the stagecoach robber, always a masked man, gun in hand, disappearing into the dust. But the image you've seen your whole life hides an uncomfortable detail. The last stagecoach robbery of the Old West wasn't pulled off by any of them. It was done by a woman named Pearl Hart. She cut her hair very short, dressed in men's clothes, and held up a stagecoach at gunpoint, single-handedly bringing an entire era of frontier crime to an end. No famous gunslinger can say the same. The final chapter of this story has a woman's name on it. And what did they do to her? The press turned the whole thing into a joke, selling the last stagecoach robber as a sensationalized caricature, a newspaper curiosity. Meanwhile, male outlaws got movies, legends, and statues. They stole from her the place in history that any man would have been given for free. Pearl at least got paid for her robbery. The next man carried an entire expedition across a continent, and his payment was exactly nothing. Number 14. You've seen Lewis and Clark in books, on statues, even on coins. Two heroes who crossed America. But there was a third man on that journey, and Hollywood never told his story. His name was York, a black man, enslaved from birth, owned by William Clark. From 1804 to 1806, York crossed the entire continent with the expedition. He hunted buffalo to feed the group, swam through freezing rivers, and negotiated with indigenous nations who called him Great Medicine. Without him, many historians say the mission would have failed. And what was his reward? No pay, no land, no medal. Everything the other men received. Clark kept him enslaved for more than 10 years after they returned, and only freed him when it was already too late. York helped map a nation that never recognized him as a free man. He carried America on his back, and America erased his name. York waited his whole life for a freedom that came too late. The next woman didn't wait. She walked into a courtroom and took hers. Number 15. Hollywood loves showing California's pioneers, white men in hats, landowners building cities from the ground up. But there's one name the movies never mention. Biddy Mason was born enslaved, without even the right to her own body. She did the unthinkable. She took the system to court and won her freedom in a courtroom, at a time when a black woman's word was worth almost nothing. Once free, she didn't stop there. She worked, saved money, and became one of the richest women in California, using her fortune for philanthropy to help people who had nothing. A formerly enslaved woman became a pillar of one of the most valuable regions in America. And what did they do with that story? It disappeared from the books. The white pioneers got statues and movies. Biddy Mason got forgotten. Biddy used her fortune to lift up a city. The next woman used hers to put shattered families back together, while searching, year after year, for one person she could never find. Number 16. Hollywood loves showing the Colorado pioneer, a white man with a pickaxe in his hand, striking it rich during the gold rush. But one of the first fortunes made in those mountains was built by a black woman born enslaved. Her name, Clara Brown. Born in Kentucky, she bought her own freedom and arrived in Colorado in 1859, doing laundry for miners. While they blew their gold in saloons, she saved every penny and invested in land and mines. She became rich. And do you know what she did with the money? After the Civil War, she spent her fortune paying for trips to reunite black families torn apart by slavery. Dozens of people brought west at her expense, while she searched for her own daughter, who had been sold decades earlier. The books celebrate the gold barons, but Clara's name nearly disappeared. She built a fortune from nothing and used it all to rebuild shattered families. And history pretended she never existed. Clara spent her life searching for her daughter. The next man's life ended in a single morning, one rifle shot from a man paid to fire it, and nobody was ever arrested for it. Number 17. Hollywood loves the hired gun, the mysterious man who rides into town and settles everything with one shot. But no one tells the story of the person on the other end of the gun. Isim Dart was born enslaved in Arkansas around 1849 under the name Ned Huddleston. Free after the war, he became one of the best horse trainers in the West and built his own ranch in Browns Park. The region's powerful cattlemen accused him of cattle rustling, with no evidence, no trial, no jury. In October 1900, a hired gun lay in wait and took him down with a single rifle shot as he stepped out of his cabin. He was about 51 years old. No one was arrested. No one was tried. The official story took a black rancher who succeeded through his own hard work and reduced him to a footnote about cattle rustlers. They killed the man twice, first with a bullet, then with silence. Isim was an innocent man remembered as an outlaw. The next man was a real outlaw, as feared as Billy the Kid, hunted across an entire territory, and Hollywood still decided he wasn't worth a single movie. Number 18. Hollywood turned Billy the Kid into the legend of the young outlaw. Movies, books, the white face of crime in the Old West. But in the 1890s, there was another name that terrorized the territory just as much, and the movies pretended he never existed. His name was Crawford Goldsby, known as Cherokee Bill, the son of a black buffalo soldier and a mother of Cherokee black and white ancestry. Before he turned 19, he rode with the Cook Gang, robbing banks, trains, and stores across Indian Territory with a $1,300 bounty on his head. Captured in 1895, he was hanged at age 20 by the famous hanging judge, Isaac Parker, and on the gallows he said only, "I came here to die, not to make a speech." Newspapers at the time compared him to Billy the Kid, but Hollywood erased him or reduced him to a nameless villain. A white outlaw became a myth and made it to the movies. The dark-skinned one became a footnote. Cherokee Bill robbed trains. The next cowboy did something far bigger. He rewrote the entire prehistory of this continent, and the credit went to men in a museum who never set foot in that ravine. Number 19. Hollywood painted the cowboy as a white hero in a hat, but the man who changed America's prehistory was born enslaved in Texas. George McJunkan taught himself to read without ever setting foot in a classroom, became the foreman of the Crowfoot Ranch in New Mexico, and studied fossils and stars in his spare time. In 1908, after a flood, he found giant bones in a ravine called Wild Horse Arroyo near Folsom, bones from extinct Ice Age bison. He spent years writing to scientists, telling them it was important. No one listened to a black cowboy. He died in 1922, and it wasn't until 1926 that they excavated the site and found spear points alongside the bones, proof that humans had lived in America more than 10,000 years ago. The discovery rewrote the continent's prehistory, but the credit went to the museum men, not the man who found it all. He found the answer. They got the glory. And now, remember at the start, When I said I was saving the worst for last, this is it, because the 19 names you just heard were the victims of the erasure. Number 20 is the man who built the machine that did the erasing. Number 20, Buffalo Bill, the name that became synonymous with the Old West, the white-hatted hero Hollywood turned into a legend. But the show that made him famous hid something no one likes to admit. William Cody's Wild West show was a spectacle built on the defeat of an entire people. Starting in 1883, he hired hundreds of Lakota people, including Sitting Bull himself, in 1885 for about $50 a week. Warriors who had survived real battles were paid to reenact, night after night, the same attacks used to justify their extermination. The audience gave them standing ovations. These men lost twice, first their land, then their own history, rewritten as pure entertainment. The authentic Wild West all of America bought was theater, with a script, costumes, and carefully chosen villains. They turned a massacre into box office success, and they still called it history. This is why I saved him for last. The Wild West you grew up loving, the one with no room for Bass Reeves, no room for Mary Fields, no room for Bill Pickett, wasn't an accident of memory. It was manufactured, right there on that stage, ticket by ticket, night after night. 19 real people erased, one myth sold in their place.